Maggie sat at the kitchen table, the soft glow of the pendant light casting a warm halo over the chaos of her thoughts. The silence of the house was deafening, broken only by the faint hum of the refrigerator. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard of her laptop, trembling slightly as she tried to organize her emotions into coherent words. She had rehearsed this moment in her mind 100 times, but now that it was here, doubt crept in like an uninvited guest. Her eyes flitted toward the wedding photo on the counter, a younger version of herself laughing, carefree, in Josh's arms. That version of their love felt like a lifetime ago, a faded memory eclipsed by years of neglect and silent resentment. She took a deep breath, steadied her hands, and began to type. Josh, I've spent so much time thinking about us, about what we've become. Our marriage feels more like a prison than a partnership, and I can't stay in a relationship that drains me. I feel alone, unsupported, and unheard. She paused, her eyes welling up with tears. The words felt cold, cutting, but they were her truth. She continued typing, the dam of her emotions breaking open. You've always assumed I'd stay, no matter how much distance grew between us. But I can't do it anymore. This isn't the life I want, and it's not the love I deserve. I need space to find myself again. The weight of the words hit her like a wave. She wiped her cheeks quickly and reread the email. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. She added the final sentence with a trembling hand. I'm filing for divorce. Please don't try to stop me. Maggie. She hovered over the send button for a moment, the gravity of her decision pressing down on her chest. Then, with one decisive click, it was done. The email flew into cyberspace, carrying with it the broken pieces of their marriage. As the seconds ticked by, Maggie felt an odd mix of relief and fear. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the quiet street below. Her thoughts raced. What would Josh do? Would he be angry? Dismissive? Beg her to stay? The uncertainty gnawed at her, and she felt a twinge of regret. But then she shook her head. No, this was the right thing to do. She couldn't keep losing herself in a relationship that felt like slow suffocation. Her phone buzzed on the counter, jolting her out of her thoughts. She froze. It couldn't be Josh. Not yet. He never checked his email this quickly. Heart pounding, she reached for the phone. It was him. Josh, got your email. Can we talk? The words felt heavier than they should have. She stared at the screen, unsure of how to respond. After a few moments, she typed back, Maggie, I said everything I needed to say in the email. The dots indicating Josh was typing appeared, then stopped. A long pause. Her phone buzzed again. You really think this is the answer? Just walking away? Her breath hitched. She typed quickly, her frustration boiling over. Yes, I do. Because talking hasn't worked. Silence hasn't worked. I can't keep pretending everything is fine when it's not. This time, the response came almost immediately. I never thought you'd actually go through with it. She could feel the mix of disbelief and anger in his words. She typed back before she could second-guess herself. Maggie, maybe that's part of the problem. Silence. No response. She set the phone down, her hands shaking. For a moment, she wondered if she'd gone too far. But then she thought about all the nights she'd cried herself to sleep, feeling like a ghost in her own home. No, this wasn't too far. This was survival. As the minutes stretched into an hour, she tried to busy herself by tidying up the kitchen, but her mind wouldn't stop racing. Just as she was about to head to bed, her phone buzzed again. It was another message from Josh, but this one was different. Josh, I'm not giving up on us, Maggie. Not yet. Her heart skipped a beat, but she wasn't sure if it was from hope or dread. She stared at the screen, uncertain of how to respond. For the first time in months, Josh seemed willing to fight for their marriage, but was it too late? She closed her eyes, the weight of her decision pressing down on her. Tomorrow would bring answers, but tonight, all she had was the silence of the house and the storm raging inside her. The next morning, Maggie woke to the soft chime of her phone. Groggy, she reached for it on the nightstand, her heart sinking as she saw Josh's name on the screen. A knot of anxiety twisted in her stomach. His response had come quicker than expected. Taking a deep breath, she opened the email. Maggie, I read your email. I won't try to change your mind, but before you go, there are things I need to say. You talk about feeling trapped, but did you know I felt the same way? Not because of you, but because I didn't know how to give you what you needed. I saw the distance growing, but I was too scared to confront it. I thought if I stayed quiet, it would fix itself. You're right. Our marriage as it stands is over. But I don't want to lose you. Not like this. I made dinner reservations at the place we went to on our first anniversary, the one you loved. I've cleared my schedule to talk, to really listen. If this letter is truly goodbye, then I'll respect that. But if there's even a small part of you that wants to try, I'm here. Josh. Maggie sat up rereading the email. Her chest tightened as the words sank in. This wasn't the defensive, dismissive Josh she'd grown accustomed to. There was vulnerability in his message, a rawness she hadn't expected. For the first time in years, it felt like he was truly seeing her. But was it too little, too late? She stared at her phone for several minutes, debating how to respond. Finally, she typed, "Maggie, dinner? Why now, Josh?" The reply came almost instantly. "Because I finally realized what I stand to lose." Her hands hovered over the screen, unsure of how to respond. She felt the anger rise again. Why did it take her threatening to leave for him to wake up? She replied curtly, "You've had years to realize that." Her phone buzzed again. "You're right, and I can't change the past, but I'm asking for one chance to show you I'm ready to do better." She stared at the message, torn. It would be so easy to delete it, to ignore him, and move forward with her plan. But something about his tone gave her pause. She thought of the years they'd shared, the good times before everything fell apart, and a flicker of doubt crept in. Could he mean it this time? After a long moment, she typed back, "Fine. One dinner, but this doesn't mean anything. I'll take what I can get." Later that evening, Maggie sat in her car outside the restaurant, gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her heart raced as she watched the entrance, debating whether she should just drive away. But before she could decide, she saw Josh step out of his car. He looked different, not physically, but his usual confident demeanor seemed softened. He hesitated before walking inside, glancing around as though searching for her. Against her better judgment, she opened the door and got out. When Josh spotted her, he offered a tentative smile. "You came," he said, his voice tinged with relief. "Don't make me regret it," she replied coolly, brushing past him and into the restaurant. They were seated at a small table in the corner, away from the bustle of the main dining area. Maggie folded her arms, leaning back in her chair. "So what's this about, Josh? What do you think one dinner will fix?" Josh sighed, leaning forward. "I know it's not enough, Maggie. I know I've let you down for a long time, but I also know I can't let you walk away without trying." She raised an eyebrow. "And what exactly are you trying to do? Convince me everything will magically get better?" "No," he said firmly. "I'm trying to tell you I see it now. The distance, the way I've been shutting you out. I thought I was doing what I was supposed to, providing for us, keeping things stable. But I realize now that I was just coasting, and that's not fair to you." Maggie's eyes narrowed. "It's a little late for self-reflection, don't you think?" Josh nodded, his expression pained. "It is. I know it is. But I'm here now, and I want to fix this. If you'll let me." She studied him, searching for any hint of insincerity. "And what happens if I give you another chance and nothing changes? I've been down this road before, Josh. Promises don't mean much without action." "I know," he said, his voice breaking slightly, "and I can't ask you to trust me right away, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to earn it back." Maggie looked away, her emotions swirling. She had spent so long building walls around her heart, convinced that Josh didn't care enough to tear them down. And now, here he was, asking her to let him try. "Why should I believe you?" she asked quietly. Josh reached across the table, his hand hovering near hers. "Because I've never been more afraid of losing something in my life." She didn't move, didn't speak. The weight of his words hung in the air between them, heavy and unresolved. For the first time in years, Maggie felt the smallest crack in the armor she'd built around herself. "I'll think about it," she said finally, pulling her hand back. Josh nodded, a flicker of hope in his eyes. "That's all I'm asking." As they left the restaurant, Maggie's mind raced. She didn't know if she could trust him again, but for the first time in years, she wasn't sure if she wanted to leave either. The question was, could they truly rebuild, or was it already too late? Maggie sat across from Josh at the small, candlelit table. The restaurant was as she remembered, cozy, intimate, and full of memories she had tried to bury. She traced the edge of her water glass with her finger, avoiding his gaze. Josh, for his part, looked nervous, his usually confident demeanor replaced with an awkward tension. "Thanks for coming," he said softly, breaking the silence. She glanced up briefly, her expression neutral. "Let's not waste time, Josh. Say what you need to say." He nodded, exhaling slowly. "I've been thinking a lot about what you wrote, about how I made you feel. And you're right, Maggie. I let us drift apart. I stopped showing you how much I care, and I hate myself for it." Maggie crossed her arms, leaning back in her chair. "You hate yourself now? After years of me begging you to listen? After feeling invisible in my own marriage? Forgive me if I don't find that comforting." Josh winced, her words cutting deep. "I know I've hurt you, and I know I should have done something sooner. But Maggie, I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know where to start." "You could have started by talking to me," she shot back. "By asking how I was doing, by making an effort instead of pretending everything was fine. Instead, you just shut down." "I thought I was protecting us," Josh admitted, his voice raw. "I thought if I worked harder, if I focused on keeping things stable, it would be enough. But I see now it wasn't. I wasn't there for you the way you needed me to be." She let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head. "You think stable is what I needed? I needed love, Josh. Attention. I needed a partner who didn't make me feel like I was carrying the weight of this relationship on my own." Josh's shoulders slumped, and for a moment he looked utterly defeated. "You're right," he said quietly. "I failed you, Maggie. I failed us. And I hate that it took you leaving for me to see it." Her chest tightened at the sincerity in his voice, but she wasn't ready to let him off the hook. "Why now, Josh? Why this dinner? What's changed?" "I realized how much I've been taking you for granted," he said, his eyes meeting hers. "I've spent the last few days thinking about every moment I should have fought harder for us, and I'm done being the guy who lets you slip away without a fight." Maggie's walls, carefully constructed over years of disappointment, began to crack. "Words are easy," she said, her voice softer now. "But actions are what matter, Josh. I've heard promises before. What makes this any different?" Josh leaned forward, his hands clasped together on the table. "Because I'm not just saying it, Maggie. I've already started making changes. I cleared my schedule to make time for us. I've been talking to a counselor to figure out why I shut down the way I do. I don't want to just patch things up. I want to rebuild, from the ground up, if that's what it takes." She studied him, searching for any hint of insincerity. What she saw wasn't the overconfident man she'd grown used to, but someone vulnerable, someone genuinely afraid of losing her. "I don't know if I can trust you again," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I don't know if I even want to." Josh nodded, his expression pained but understanding. "I get that, and I don't expect you to trust me overnight, but if there's even a part of you that still believes in us, I'll do whatever it takes to prove I'm worth it." Maggie looked down, her emotions a storm of anger, sadness, and a faint flicker of hope. "You're asking for a lot, Josh." "I know I am," he said, "and I know I don't deserve it. But Maggie, you're my everything. Losing you would be the biggest mistake of my life." The sincerity in his voice was undeniable, and for the first time in years, Maggie felt something she thought she'd lost, the faint echo of the man she had fallen in love with. The waiter arrived with their meals, breaking the intensity of the moment. They ate in silence for a few minutes, the weight of their conversation hanging in the air. Finally, Maggie spoke. "I'm not making any promises," she said, her voice steady. "If I agree to give this a chance, it'll be on my terms. And the second I feel like nothing's changed, I'm done. For good." Josh nodded, his eyes filled with determination. "Fair. I'll take whatever chance you're willing to give me." As they left the restaurant, Maggie felt a strange mix of emotions, relief, fear, and a sliver of hope she hadn't expected. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like it might be worth taking. The weeks following their dinner felt like walking a tightrope for Maggie. Each day was a cautious step forward, filled with moments of tentative hope and lingering doubt. Josh had promised to fight for their marriage, but Maggie wasn't ready to lower her guard entirely. She needed to see if his actions would match his words. One evening, as she arrived home from work, Maggie found Josh in the kitchen, The smell of garlic and herbs filled the air, and he was carefully plating a dish that looked far more elaborate than his usual cooking efforts. "What's this?" she asked, setting her bag down on the counter. Josh looked up, smiling nervously. "Dinner. I figured you could use a break." Maggie raised an eyebrow. "You cooked? Voluntarily?" "Shocking, I know," he said with a small chuckle. "But don't get too excited. It might still be terrible." She allowed herself a small smile, sitting down at the table as Josh set the plate in front of her. "What's the occasion?" "No occasion," he said, sitting across from her. "I just wanted to do something for you." They ate in silence for a while, the only sound the clinking of forks against plates. Maggie couldn't help but notice the effort he had put into the meal, from the neatly arranged vegetables to the folded napkins on the table. It was such a small thing, but it felt significant. "This is actually pretty good," she admitted, breaking the silence. Josh grinned. "Don't sound so surprised. I've been watching cooking videos trying to learn a thing or two." "Cooking videos," Maggie said with a smirk. "Who are you and what have you done with my husband?" "I'm trying to be better," he said, his tone growing serious. "In all the ways I should have been better before." Maggie set her fork down, her appetite fading as her emotions took over. "Josh, this is nice, but it's going to take more than a few dinners to fix what's broken." "I know," he said, leaning forward, "and I'm not expecting a quick fix. I just want you to know that I'm all in, Maggie, for the long haul." She looked at him, searching for the cracks, the signs that this was temporary, but all she saw was sincerity. It scared her more than she wanted to admit. The following week, they sat on the couch together after putting the kids to bed. The TV was on, but neither of them was paying attention. Josh finally broke the silence. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Depends," Maggie replied cautiously. "Do you think you'll ever forgive me? For all the ways I let you down?" Maggie exhaled, her gaze fixed on the coffee table. "Forgiveness isn't the hard part, Josh. It's trusting you again, believing that this time will be different." "I get that," he said quietly, "and I don't blame you for being skeptical, but I'm not going anywhere. Maggie, even if it takes years, I'll keep showing up." She glanced at him, her walls cracking just a little more. "I hope you mean that, because if you let me down again, there won't be another chance." "I won't," he said firmly. "I can't." The biggest test of their progress came a month later when Maggie's birthday arrived. She hadn't expected much. Josh wasn't exactly known for grand gestures, but as she walked into the living room that morning, she froze. The room was filled with balloons and a banner that read, "Happy Birthday, Maggie." On the table sat a small cake, surrounded by a scattering of wrapped gifts. Josh emerged from the kitchen, holding a steaming cup of her favorite coffee. "Happy birthday," he said, his face lighting up with a smile. Maggie blinked, overwhelmed. "You did all this?" "Of course," he said. "You deserve it." The kids came running in, giggling as they handed her handmade cards. Maggie sat down, taking it all in. For the first time in years, she felt truly celebrated, truly seen. As the day went on, Maggie found herself laughing more, her guard lowering just a bit. She could see how hard Josh was trying, not just with her, but with the kids too. He was present in a way he hadn't been for years, and it was beginning to feel real. That evening, as they sat together on the porch, Maggie turned to him. "Today was amazing. Thank you." Josh reached for her hand, his touch gentle but steady. "I'm glad you enjoyed it. But this is just the start, Maggie. I'm not doing this for points. I'm doing it because I love you, and I'm sorry it took me so long to show it." Tears welled up in her eyes, but she didn't pull her hand away. "I'm scared, Josh. Scared of letting myself believe this is real." "I get that," he said, "but I'll keep proving it to you, one day at a time." For the first time in a long time, Maggie felt a spark of hope. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but sitting there with Josh, she realized she wanted to try. Maybe, just maybe, they could build something new from the ashes of what they had lost.